Stephen Lorenzo Hafen. I've been down here. This is where my wife grew up, on the dairy farm. Had 4 kids in the family, and the farm was divided into 4 pieces, and we ended up with this corner. And my father-in-law spent his life here on the dairy farm, and I wanted him to see something done with where he spent a big part of his life. So we asked permission from the family to put in a horse motel, and this used to be the milk house. We put about $50,000 into this, what used to be the milk house, to make it a saddle shop. And I've been down here for over 20 years. Well, when I was just a kid, I worked up Miles Saddle and Shoe Repair for Gray Wilkin, and that's where I got the interest in building saddles. Of course, I was just a kid working a job at the time, but I enjoyed doing leather work. I worked for him for several years, and then I went to work for a center department store, but I always did some leather work. Had a little bench down the basement of our house where I did a little leather work. And then I went to work for the school district, and Gray came here after I set this up. He came here and was here for several years, and then he went out to, I think it was Panaca or Caliente. Gray gave me the opportunity to trace any pattern that he had for building saddles, and of course I learned that on a side of leather there's a place for every part of the saddle to come from. You can't just put the leather down and cut it out from anywhere, because the neck is heavier than the back end, and the belly is soft, and the back is hard, and so you have to learn where to cut the leather from to make a saddle. And if it's cut from where it should be cut from, then it's going to last a long time. Gray Wilkin, the one that taught me the saddle business, said he made 2 saddles in 2 weeks, but he worked night and day on them. And I have people ask me that question all the time, but I've never just started on a saddle and haven't done anything but build that saddle till it was finished. If I have repair work, then I set the new one aside and do the repair work, then I go back to the new one. Like people, Gray used to take 500 down and tell them 3 years for a saddle. But I just build them, and most of my saddles I just build and then sell them. There's a lot of different saddle makers that'll take a little piece of wire and try this and try that, and I don't believe in all that stuff. If you try the bars on the horse, and the horse's back is wet, evenly wet, then the saddle's going to fit. When these saddle companies that make a lot of saddles, they make a lot of them the same, exactly the same. So they have a press. They put the leather down, and then they press the tooling into it. The leather can't be too wet or too dry. It has to be just right for the tooling to stay. If it's too wet, then it'll eventually, a lot of it'll come out. And so, there's a lot to know about when to put the tooling into the leather. But there's, and you can tell a one that's done by a press or one that's hand tooled. If you look at one side and then the other side, if you look at it close enough on a press, it's perfect. But on the hand tooled, there'd be something a little different, because we're not perfect, and we don't do everything perfect. Even though you try to tool one side, like the fender or the skirt or the back housing, you try to do it all the same. But when you're tooling, you don't do it exactly the same. And that's one of the things that on a hand tooled saddle, if somebody tells you it's hand tooled, you look at it long enough, you'll be able to tell if it's hand tooled, because there'll be something a little different on one side than there is on the other side. Gray always said they can't run around the horse fast enough to tell the difference. And there's a lot of truth to that.